Hi guys, we're going to be working together on creating an Andy Warhol inspired self-portrait painting. And if you're not sure how to get a portrait looking similar to mine, how it's a lot of black and whites and grays, I do have a video linked below that will show you how to do that using an online tool. You can also do it in Photoshop. That's where I did mine. You can also alter it by just upping the contrast and lightness on your phone or computer or whatever you're using photo editing tool. So first of all, if you get a printout that looks like mine where you feel like you look a little too washed out, where you can see that like my head is connected to my shirt, I can't really tell my shirt from my background, this is the time where you're going to want to go in first looking at the original photo. You want to go in and start drawing in with pencil where those lines need to go. So I'm looking at my original photo and I'm noticing that this line here is part of my collar. So I'm going to just draw with pencil where the rest of my collar would be. And already that's helping define my neck to my shirt. I'm going to look and see if I can figure out where my shoulder is exactly. And now that I've kind of defined where my shoulders are supposed to be, I'm going to try to further define my hair because my hair has sort of a highlight on the edge. I'm not able to see the outline of the hair very easily, so I am going to go through and do that. I have now pretty well defined those aspects. If there's anything else that you feel like is lost or missing or you can't really identify the lines for, you can do that. Facial features, things like that. That would be, this would be also a good time to go in there and try to just add a little bit more to it. Sometimes when you are doing this posterizing effect, it can wash things out a little bit more than you anticipated. So just going in and adjusting and fixing a few things can definitely be helpful. Of course, you don't want to do too much because the point is you did want to have sort of this cartoony effect. It's part of the Andy Warhol style. So I think I've pretty well filled in the gaps of the things that are missing in my image, and now I'm ready to start doing my painting process. So before I start painting, I want to think about what kind of color scheme I'm planning on doing. So what I've done for myself here is created a painting plan worksheet with just a reminder of different color schemes. I will have this handout linked below if you are interested in using it yourself, but you can easily just write this down on a scrap paper as well. So what I'm doing is going to write down the color scheme that I'm choosing, and then I'm going to assign each value with a color. And I want to go from my lightest to my darkest, because in order for this to come out correctly, that's the direction you need to go in. You can't have a dark color where light things are and a light color where dark things are. You're going to get a really weird sort of negative photo effect, and it's going to look really bizarre. So I think the color scheme that I'm going to choose is analogous. Analogous are colors that are right next to each other in the color wheel. Now here it's listed as 3 colors in a row. Obviously you can do more than 3, you could do 4 or even 5, but these are just kind of how they're lumped together. So what I'm going to do is select, I think, this green, blue-green kind of tone. So right here I'm going to write analogous. And what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to assign each part of my picture with a color from my chosen color scheme, which again is blue, blue-green, like kind of range. So I'm going to choose one to be my lightest. Now sometimes it's obvious if I chose a color scheme that has a yellow in it, for example, or an orange, like maybe I'm doing blue and orange. Obviously those colors like yellow or orange are going to be your lightest, so you want to pick those as colors that are going to go in the white and light gray area. But if you're doing something like I'm doing green and blue or blue and purple, they're both kind of dark colors, so it's not really doesn't really matter which one you put down first in this case, but you are going to want to make whatever you put down first as your lightest. So I think I'm going to do light blue as my lightest, so that means I'm going to have to create a light blue. For my light gray, I think I'm going to do a lighter blue-green. So when I am filling this out, I want to make sure that I'm thinking about how this is going to be my lightest. So it needs to be a very light blue. This one's going to be a little bit darker than this one. Dark gray, I think I'm just going to do a blue-green color, like a turquoise teal. And then I think for my black, I might just do a dark green or maybe a regular blue. I have to kind of see how things are going. So I'm going to pick one of those for my black. I haven't decided which one yet, so I'm just going to kind of leave both down with some question marks because I'm not really sure. I think this is the direction I want to go in for the first set, and it's going to kind of change as I go along. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my lightest color. I think I'm going to start with my whites. So anything that is white on my picture is going to be painted with my lightest color, which is light blue. All right, so here are my mixed colors in my palette, and I have some that I haven't mixed so that I have the opportunity to still play around with it. If you want to see how I am mixing these colors and how I'm caring for the palette, again, I have a video linked for that down below, just so that you can get a better idea of how you should be preserving your paints, how to clean your paints, how to take care of your brushes, all of that good stuff. Now the brushes I'm using are synthetic brushes. I personally think those are some of the best kind to use for this particular assignment. When you are using them, they stay in place. If I kind of push them down, even when wet, they kind of spring back into the shape that they were in, and that is really good for trying to get precision in your work. I also like that they're softer and they don't create scratchy surface to my paint. It should give me a nice smooth surface. And finally, I'm making sure I'm using round brushes that have curves and points at the end, because those, in my opinion, are going to help me get into the smaller details a lot better than if I am using a flat brush, which is going to be a little bit more straight and angular. All right, I'm going to start with working on anything that is white with my lightest color, which is my light blue. That's what I had written down in my plan, and I'm going to focus primarily on my face, neck, and hair first. I'm going to leave my shirt for a little bit later, and the only reason why I'm doing that is because I had to draw a line to define where my neck, face, and shirt was, and because of that, I'm a little concerned about using the same color for my shirt as for the rest of it. I'm afraid, again, it'll blend in, so I might do a slightly different color for my shirt just so we see more difference. That's something you could definitely do as well. If the shirt was already a different color, like an obvious dark gray or black or something, then I wouldn't be concerned about it. But because it's the same exact value as my neck and hair and all of that, I'm going to try to, I think, use a different color down here. So I'm just going to focus on face and hair first, and the only thing I'm definitely not doing is background until the very end. So I'm going to take some paint on my brush, and I'm going to zoom in so you can kind of see how I'm spreading this out and how I'm doing this. Okay, so I have some paint on my brush, and what I'm going to do is put it down on the paper. And what a lot of people tend to do is do this. They kind of like blob it on, and then it's just like a really blobby, sloppy mess. And that's not what you want to do. You want to spread the paint out. So I'm going to spread the paint out. And when I get close to the edge of something, I'm going to go slower. Going slower and more carefully is definitely the way to go. If as you're working you feel like the color you've chosen just actually is looking darker than you anticipated, then you might want to stop and remix your colors and continue again. You can always paint on top of stuff that you've done as well. If you have too much, you can also pull some off. Just pull it off and wipe it back into your tray. Something else to note is that colors always dry darker than they first appear on the paper. So if you feel like it's looking too dark after it's dried, then that might be a sign you need to lighten up your colors and try again. So definitely always going lighter is better than going too dark. Once again, whenever you get close to something that you don't want to mess up on, just go nice and slowly rotate your brush, rotate the paper even, if that helps you get things from a different angle. If you go over too much, take your finger or something and just wipe off a little excess if that's necessary. Switch brushes too. If I'm gonna be trying to get into this small area, I don't wanna use this big brush anymore. I'm going to set this brush down, switch to a smaller brush, and I'm going to try to peek inside here and be a little bit more careful and neat and precise as best I can. Another thing that you can do if you feel like it is really hard to get certain details, look, let's say I want to do my hair here. Okay, those look like a lot of tiny little lines to do. That seems like it's going to be a little overwhelming and stressful. So what I could do instead is take a small dollop and just brush over the whole thing and really spread it out a lot. And if I spread it out a whole lot, you should be able to still see the dark underneath, and I can paint on top of that when I'm ready to do my darker colors. But if you're going to do something like this, you definitely have to spread out the color really thin so that you can see through it, so it's more translucent and not as thick when you're painting. So if you're going to do this, I would only do this with small little parts that are really hard to get at, kind of like what I was talking about, trying to get those tiny hairs, because then I can go into this with a darker color when I'm ready to do my blacks, and I can get in there and kind of still see the dark parts and still see where to put them. But this way I was able to get all of the light stuff done pretty quickly. Another tip I want to offer you is a lot of times people have a hard time with their hand shaking and moving, and that's because they're holding their hand up in the air. If you're holding your hand up while you paint like this, where it's sort of hovering above the paper, you're going to not be able to be as precise. You're going to have a really hard time getting into some details. And so what I recommend instead is resting your hand on your paper. So actually letting the hand rest right on the paper is going to give your hand some support so that you're able to guide your brush a little more carefully. The other thing you can do is, if you do have to hover because of the angle you have to get at, there's just no way about it, use your pinky or any other finger to kind of at least have that on the ground on the table so that you can use that as a guide. So even if you have to be up a little bit, you can have something there that's anchoring you down. Another thing I'm going to show you right here, if I take my brush, my small brush, and I push down to make a line with it, you're going to see how thick that line appears to be. If I take the same brush, but this time just use the tippy tip of it, and I don't put it down so it's flattened, you can see how skinny I can get my line. So there's a range of lines that you can get depending on how you hold your brush. If I push, the more I push down, the flatter and wider the line is going to appear, the more coverage I'm going to have. The more I keep it on its tippy tip, the thinner the line is going to be and the more precise I can be. So you have to kind of play with your brush a little bit and learn how to use it and learn what's going to work and what's not going to work for the area that you're just painting. Focus on the one value. Don't try to do the switch colors and suddenly do things that are dark gray, light gray, black. Just keep on going with the same thing. Don't do anything different. You're going to confuse yourself an awful lot if you do. So just keep on going with what you're doing until you finish the very first value. Okay, now that I'm done with my whites on my face and everything, it's gonna look crazy, okay? The first time you do this, you're gonna be like, this looks crazy. I feel like this is not going well. I see all these empty weird spots and it just looks messy. Most paintings have to go through an ugly phase before they get through the pretty, okay? You have to work your way through it. So fight your way through this ugly stage here, and I promise it's gonna all come together. So now I'm gonna move into my light grays. And so I think I had said I was going to do this blue green sort of color, but notice that it's still a little bit lighter. It's not a super dark blue green, but I'm still trying to make it a darker value than my lightest. I don't want it to be as light as that, but I want it to be a little bit darker, but not so extremely dark. I want to slowly get darker. As my values get darker on my face, I want my values for my colors to get darker as well. So I'm going to move in with this one, and I'm definitely going to want my tiny brush because for this one I've got a lot of tiny details. If you can see, I have very few light spots left open, and that's because they are very small and subtle. So I'm trying to be really careful when I do my light grays that I am just really being as exact and careful as I can be. Okay, so now I am ready to move on to my next one. Again, I'm still not worrying about my shirt yet, although maybe I will fill in this one because that definitely is a light gray. And I'm ready to move into my dark gray and then finally my black, and then we'll assess and decide what I'm going to do with my sweatshirt part. Final thing for the blacks, I think I've decided I think I'm going to go with blue, and then I think I'm going to probably focus on my sweatshirt being more of green because I feel like I have an awful lot of blue tones up here, and yes, the blue green, but I think the blue is very overwhelming, so I think I'm going to do green more for the shirt, which means I think I'm going to do the blue for the black. So now here's something that you might want to know about this. When you're painting directly on paper like this, if I take the blue and I paint it directly on the black, it's going to sort of just soak right in to the black paper, and you're really not going to see much of anything show up. It's going to look just like it did. It's not really going to look any different. So the trick to get around that is take a little bit of white and just seriously the tiniest little bit of white. You don't want a lot, just a little bit, and put it directly inside your color that is going to be your darkest, and the smallest little bit, mix it up, and it's going to just lighten up that color just ever so slightly. But what that'll do is when you paint with it, it's going to help it maintain the tone that it actually is, so you don't end up losing it. So that's just a little trick to do. If you feel like it's blending right into the black, you can't see it anymore, especially when it dries, tiny dollop of white, just a little bit, to kind of brighten up that dark tone that you're going for, and it'll really help a lot when it's drying. is my shirt, and again, I think I'm going to go with the green color. I probably will lighten up the green because I don't think I want to go super dark. I want to keep it light, but maybe not as light as the blue. So I'm going to do that, and then we will talk about the background. All right, once you've reached this level, the next thing you're going to want to do before you do the background is consider if there's any areas that maybe you need to do more layers, if the paper is showing through and there's some white spots or anything like that. You definitely want to go through and fix that, or if it was an especially dark color and it's still showing through, I would say go over and try to trim that up. The other thing you're going to notice I did was I made sure my shirt and everything about me went right to the edge of the paper. Sometimes when you print out a picture, which you couldn't tell because mine was white, but sometimes you can see, like if it was a black shirt, you'd see like this white border all the way around because of the way the printer works. It doesn't print all the way to the edge. You're going to want to paint all the way to the edge. Just pretend it keeps going because that's going to give you the most finely tuned finished look. So I'm going to do a few little touch-ups, and then the last thing when I'm done with my touch-ups is I'm going to do my background. The background can be one of several different options. One, you could paint it white. Now, yes, I know it's white right now, but I do recommend actually painting it white if you decide to do a white background, because that will look really finished and it'll match the rest of the painted portrait. You could go with black. White and black are both great ones because they're very neutral. The other option is to pick a color that goes with your color scheme but is different than something you've already used. So I have very dark blue, I have very light blue, so maybe I could do a medium tone blue. I have this light green, but I could do a darker green. So there's a variety of options I could do to finish it off. So I'm going to do my details and then finish my background. And there we have our finished self-portrait painting in the style of Andy Warhol. I decided to go with sort of a nice medium blue, darker than my hair, so my hair would stand out, but not so dark that it kind of blended in. I kind of debated between this and black. I really wasn't sure which direction to go. I think both would have come out really nice. So this is the choice I made, but keep in mind that if you just make a choice that you're not wild about, just wait for it to dry and paint right over it. No big deal. All right, I hope you guys had a lot of fun making your portraits with me, and I absolutely cannot wait to see how yours turn out. If you finish one relatively quickly, I would recommend trying it again. Try a different set of colors, and maybe even doing several different paintings of it, and that way you can display them all together as a finished piece in the style of Andy Warhol. All right, have fun and happy art making.